Today in this video, we'll explore what would happen to a human body if it entered dimensions beyond our own. Stick with us till the end, because what you're about to hear is something you've probably never imagined before. Let's see what happens to your body when you enter a zero-dimensional world. Zero dimensions means a point, but it's not a tiny dot. Rather, it's a point with no size at all. No length, no width, no height. It doesn't occupy space. It doesn't extend in any direction. It simply is. There is no movement here because movement requires space. There is no time here because time requires change. If you try to imagine yourself at zero dimensions, you immediately hit a wall because there is no you, no body, no thought, no awareness. It's not darkness. It's not emptiness. It's just existence without properties. In mathematics, a point is the origin of everything. In physics terms, it's a state with 0 degrees of freedom. Nothing can happen there, but everything can start from there. So when you enter zero dimensions, you don't fade into nothing. You get compressed into a single point with no size. You technically still exist, but even the universe would struggle to notice you.
So it's my world.
The moment you enter a one-dimensional world, you stop being a body and become a line. No thickness, no depth, no organs stacked behind each other. Just a single stretched shape existing along one direction. In this world, you can move only in two ways, forward or backward. That's it. You can't turn, because turning requires another direction. You can't go around anything because there is no around. If another one-dimensional being appears in front of you, neither of you can pass the other. There is no over, no under, no sideways. You either stop or collide. Hiding is impossible. Inside and outside don't exist. Your entire universe is blocked. There is no alternative route. This is an extremely restricted reality, almost claustrophobic, but it introduces something crucial for the first time: directional change. There is now a sense of before and after along a line. Events can happen in sequence. Motion becomes meaningful, even though it is painfully limited. While this world is far too simple for matter or complex structures to exist, it represents the earliest geometric idea of space. A universe with a single degree of freedom, where change is possible, but complexity is not. If you entered a two-dimensional world, you would be completely flat. Your body would exist only as an outline. In a two-dimensional world, normal matter and atoms as we know them couldn't exist, so you would lose your familiar material body. If anything like life existed there, it would have to be made from some completely different hypothetical form of matter. For you, the entire reality would be just a flat surface. You could still have relationships, maybe even something like a family and a house, but the idea of going inside your house wouldn't exist. There is no real inside or outside in two dimensions. You could move left and right, forward and backward, and for the first time, you could go around obstacles. But there's something you still cannot do. You can't turn. You cannot see above or below, because those directions simply do not exist in your world. This is where something deeply important happens. A two-dimensional being cannot imagine the third dimension. Not because it's stupid, but because its brain evolved entirely inside a flat world. Even if a three-dimensional object interacts with a two-dimensional world, the 2D being would only see slices of it. If a sphere passed through their world, they wouldn't see a sphere. They would see a point that becomes a circle, grows, shrinks, and disappears, never the full object. Keep this in mind. This idea comes back later in a very uncomfortable way. When you enter a three-dimensional world, you finally gain length, width, and height. Volume becomes real. Thickness exists. Inside and outside now make sense. This is the dimension where matter as we know it becomes possible. Atoms can stack and form stable structures. Organs can hide inside bodies. Objects can exist in layers instead of being exposed. Gravity now starts to matter. Pressure, force, and mass become meaningful. Space feels solid. You can turn around, move freely in all directions, and in 3 dimensions, you can build, destroy, store, and conceal things. None of this is possible in lower dimensions. Reality appears as solid, separate objects interacting through physical forces. But there is one massive limitation that feels so natural, we almost never question it. You experience time only in one direction. In a 3-dimensional world, you have no control over the flow of time. Cause and effect rule everything, and we humans are completely bound to this order. Now, when you enter the 4th dimension, the real shift begins. From a 4-dimensional perspective, you are no longer a moving person traveling through time. To imagine what you would look like in a 4-dimensional world, let's take a simpler example first. Think about a star existing in our 3-dimensional universe. Now imagine this star is born, lives for billions of years, and eventually dies. For simplicity, let's assume it stays at the same position in space relative to us during its lifetime. In 3 dimensions, we see the star only at one moment at a time. But in a 4-dimensional view, its entire existence would be laid out along the time axis. It would be like placing the star on top of itself at every moment in time, one moment after another, stretching it along the time direction. Because the star changes over time, this 4-dimensional shape wouldn't be a simple straight column. The star slowly changes size, brightness, and structure as it ages and rotates. So its 4D shape would be a long structure that thickens, thins, and twists along the time dimension, capturing every stage of its life from birth to death. We can't truly imagine this shape because our brains only see 3-dimensional slices of it, just one moment at a time. But if you could see with higher dimensional eyes, you wouldn't see the star as something that changes. You would see its entire lifetime at once, every shape it ever had, every rotation it ever went through, all existing together as a single 4-dimensional structure. In that sense, you wouldn't watch the star's life happen. You would see its whole journey through time as one complete geometric object. Similarly, if you enter a 4-dimensional world, every moment of your life would be placed along the time direction. Unlike the star in the earlier example, you don't stay in one place. You move around in 3-dimensional space. So your 4-dimensional structure wouldn't be a simple straight shape. It would bend and twist through space-time, because your position in space keeps changing as time passes. In other words, your body would now have extension not just in the 3 spatial directions, but also along the time direction. Your movement through space becomes part of your shape in 4 dimensions. When you stack your entire life, every position you've ever occupied, every posture you've ever had into space-time, you don't get a single body anymore. You get one continuous, complex structure. If a higher dimensional observer could see this entire structure at once, they wouldn't see you as one person at one moment. They would see all the different versions of you across your lifetime layered together. Trying to imagine that structure inside our 3D world is impossible, in the same way a flat, 2-dimensional being can never see a full 3D creature. But remember, this higher dimensional body is still limited in size and time, because it can only exist in the places you visited during your lifetime and within the period of time you were alive. Now, because a 4-dimensional being would exist in a direction beyond our 3-dimensional space, it could interact with 3D objects in ways that feel impossible to us. From a geometric point of view, it could see the inside and outside of any 3D object at the same time, because inside and outside are only meaningful within 3 dimensions. In the same abstract sense, it could access regions of a 3D object without breaking through its surface, not by violating physics, but by approaching it from a direction we simply don't have access to. This doesn't mean such beings exist. It's a way to visualize what higher dimensional access would look like to creatures like us, who are locked into 3 dimensions of space and 1 direction of time. When you enter a 5-dimensional world, something truly strange begins to happen. If you understand the fourth dimension properly, then the fifth dimension becomes a little easier to grasp, at least conceptually. In the four-dimensional world, your entire life exists as one continuous structure stretched along the time axis. Now, to visualize the fifth dimension, you simply add one more axis to this space-time picture. This new axis does not represent another direction in space. Instead, it represents different possible histories of the same universe existing side by side. According to quantum mechanics, events do not always have a single definite outcome. A particle like a photon can exist in a superposition of many possible states until it is measured. Now apply this idea to your own life. At any given moment, you could make different choices. One version of you takes one path, another version takes a different path. In a five-dimensional picture, all of these possible versions of your four-dimensional life exist side by side along this new axis of possibilities. So if you imagine yourself as a four-dimensional being stretched across time, then adding the fifth dimension means you are no longer just one space-time structure. You become a whole bundle of space-time structures. Many versions of your life existing in parallel. Even for a four-dimensional being, this would be extremely difficult to visualize. A five-dimensional being, however, would see all of these possible life paths as part of a single larger structure. So what could a five-dimensional being do? From a lower dimensional perspective, a five-dimensional being would not be trapped inside a single timeline. It could, in principle, move across different possible histories of the same universe. It wouldn't be limited to one version of how events turned out. What feels like fate or fixed history to us would look more like a set of options laid out side by side. But even a five-dimensional being is not unlimited. It would still be finite. It would still exist within a higher dimensional structure. It would still be bound by the overall laws of whatever higher dimensional reality contains it. It would not be infinite, and it would not automatically exist for eternity. In other words, higher dimensions don't remove limits. They simply change the type of limits. A five-dimensional being may not be trapped in one timeline, but it would still be part of a larger structure it cannot step outside of. When you enter the sixth dimension, the idea of reality changes again in a much deeper way. To visualize this, imagine extending your picture one step further. In four dimensions, your life is stretched across time. In five dimensions, many possible versions of that life exist side by side. Now, in six dimensions, those entire sets of timelines exist inside completely different kinds of universes. Universes with different physical constants, different particles, and possibly even different numbers of spatial dimensions. So, in the sixth dimension, trying to imagine the shape or appearance of your body no longer really makes sense. Across universes with completely different physical laws, nothing like a familiar form can exist. The only thing that can meaningfully carry across such different realities is abstract structure or information, not anything that can be physically visualized. But even a six-dimensional being would not be truly unlimited. It would still be finite in the sense that it exists within a higher dimensional structure it does not control. It would still be bound by the meta-rules of the space of all possible universes. When you move to the seventh dimension, you reach a level where ordinary physical intuition almost completely breaks down. This is no longer just about different timelines or different universes. The seventh dimension is often described as the space that contains all possible universes, all possible timelines, and all possible physical laws at once. Everything that can exist exists somewhere within this total structure. So identity stops being something physical and becomes purely relational or structural. A seven-dimensional being, if such a thing even makes sense to talk about, would not experience reality as a sequence of events. There would be no meaningful sense of moving from one place to another or one time to another, because all places, times, laws, and outcomes are already included. From this perspective, nothing is created and nothing is destroyed. Everything that is logically possible already has a place within the structure. So what could a seven-dimensional being do? Well, this is where the idea of doing itself starts to lose meaning. Action requires change, and change requires being located within a system where time and causality operate in the usual way. At the level of the seventh dimension, reality is more like a complete map than a journey. There is nothing outside the map to move into, and nothing missing that needs to be created. Well, we can't explain more about this dimension because whatever exists there is beyond our logic and imagination. Beyond the seventh dimension, other dimensions might exist, in theory, but talking about them becomes almost meaningless. At that level, our concepts of space, time, form, and even physical laws stop applying, so there's no clear way to explain or imagine what those dimensions would be like. Ideas like consciousness or more fundamental layers of reality are sometimes speculated about, but there is no scientific evidence for them.
So yeah, it's probably better to stop imagining at this point and just stick to our own world before our brain overheats.